Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us from Bulgaria and literally from Balkans. We have people here from Croatia, from Central and Eastern Europe, maybe, I'm not sure. But we are turning into a really international seminar or webinar tonight. We have two special guests, Kристина Трифонова and Bob Spence, and I will let them introduce each other a bit later for the special topic we have tonight, which is how the small businesses can negotiate with large corporations successfully to gain what they need. There are definitely the tips and tricks that these two people can share with us. But first, for everybody who's gonna watch the recording, let me share a little bit about Rotary, and Rotary means business. So fellow Rotarians here would hear something that they hear almost every single day since they're Rotarians. Rotary is a global network of more than 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change. That's what we do across the globe, in our communities, in ourselves also. So basically what we do as Rotarians, we provide service to others, promote integrity and advance world understanding, goodwill and peace through our fellowship of business, professional and community leaders. So while, as I mentioned, fellowship, that's when we come to Rotary means business as fellowship. So Rotary means business is Rotary International friendly community focused on supporting businesses. Basically, we encourage Rotarians to support the success of other fellow Rotarians by doing business with each other and by referring other people to them. The first fellowship was organized in 2003, and Rotary International formalized Rotary means business as a fellowship in 2013. Now, as a host, I will represent first RMB Balkans and as a chair of RMB. So our Rotary means Business Balkan group was officially chartered with RMB International just 3 weeks ago. So we are newbie, but we have gathered together for more than a year now. We have a group of over 90 people in the Viber group, and we have over 220 members in our close Facebook group. And we're constantly looking for ways to make participation in our group as beneficial as possible to all fellow Rotarians, not only to RMB fellows. So events like tonight is something common that we do. We invite to our meetings professionals and leaders that could share with us their know-how and help us become better professionals, better business people, and better leaders. Fran, why don't you say a few words about Rotary means business, Central and Eastern Europe, and present yourself?
Okay, thank you very much, Ali. My name is Fran. I'm the chair of chapter officially called Croatia, but now unofficially we call it Southeast Europe because we have also friends from Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. I'm also giving you regards from our RMB director for Europe, Rotarian Robert Stezinar, who is successfully recovering from his operation. He couldn't be with us. So far, we have almost, okay, let's be exact, 148 loosely connected members in these countries. And from this fall, we are going to start doing Rotary means business meetings as they do in India to more tightly connect our Rotarian friends, and also with the new bylaws starting to accept non-Rotarians, business people and entrepreneurs into our chapter. We definitely want to stay very closely connected with our friends from Bulgaria and then support each other in our businesses and business successes. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Fran, for representing and telling us a few words about RMB Croatia and RMB Central Eastern Europe. And now I think it's time to give the word to Bob and Kристина. Bob, why don't you introduce the lady in the speakers, Kристина?
Yeah, good evening. It's a real pleasure to be involved in RMB, Ellie. I'm delighted that we've got Kристина Trifонova as part of this program. She's on the board of the British Bulgarian Business Association, and she's in the business development role in the corporate and SME part of the market for VIVACOM, the leading Balkans telecoms brand. She was in Leeds last week and doing business development. She's a very experienced and credible person to get involved in this subject, Ellie. So I'm absolutely delighted that she's on the call to be able to spar with her on this subject. So that's Christina, or I'd call her Chrissy, but forgive me for that, Christina.
Thank you, Bob. And now I'll give the chance to Chrissy to return back the favor and present you, Bob.
My pleasure to present Bob Spence, who I've met probably a year ago regarding my role in the British Bulgarian Business Association, where I sit on the board. And Bob has been very, very helpful to us, helping us bringing Bulgarian companies to the UK market. And he's an excellent also presenter and a consultant in negotiation skills and business development. What Bob does and did for me when I was in Leeds was amazing, because he managed to connect me to the right people that we need in order to keep on bringing Bulgarian companies to the UK market. He has this skill to find the right contacts and to present you in the way that these people are interested in you, and things start moving after that. So he's going to be very, very helpful for you, I think, in this call. So that's the least I can say about Bob. I can speak more, an hour and more, but let's start. That's what I suggest. So Bob, what's the advantage of selling to big businesses? That's the topic now on this call.
Yeah, there's a big advantage to that. I mean, generally, for businesses to scale up, for businesses to grow, for businesses to remain robust, and for businesses to develop, generally, the ability to sell to larger entities, it's crucial, because that enables businesses to plan long term. It enables businesses to secure their talent supply, which is the people in the industry. It repositions their relationship with their bank. It enables them to raise money. It enables them to generate shareholders' equity, if that's what's required. And it generally ring fences that business from the ups and downs of local economies, regional economies, global economies. So there is a big advantage, Chrissy, of being able to sell to big business. It's, those would be the key things.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very important for the economic growth. How is it that important?
Yes.
In your opinion?
Yeah. I mean, what I found, I referenced earlier before we started this session, that I worked for Coutts Bank in the Strand, London, as their business development lead for 7 years. So I speak about this from a British perspective, but as you know, I consult in Czech, Slovakia, and Poland, and I work for a German consulting firm. So I don't just have the British view on things. In terms of economic growth, if you can get the smaller businesses to occupy the space of the middle businesses, and the middle businesses to grow into the bigger businesses, if you can slowly but surely move businesses up the economy chain of growth, that is where our economic growth is. It's quite difficult. Let's say VIVACOM, which is a leading brand, it would be quite difficult, even with all the expertise available in VIVACOM, to generate 20% growth. It's not impossible, but it would be quite a feat. Whereas it's more easy to get 150 or 200 smaller businesses to make that same leap. And that's what happens in the UK. The UK generates, Ellie, so much VC opportunity because there is that footprint of smaller businesses getting that bit bigger. I'm not saying the UK is the greatest place. I like living here, but economic growth, I'm sure if we had members of the Bulgarian government and their economic advisor, it's that smaller group of businesses where the growth can come from. And that growth can only happen, Ellie, if those businesses can negotiate with really big business. It can't come from anywhere else. I'm talking generally. So before you put in the box that you've got a business that doesn't need big business, no worries. I'm just talking generally, Chrissy. Yeah. Well, can I just put something to you then? You have in Bulgaria, you've got what I'll call expert status with regards to the SME market in your role in VIVACOM. You would definitely, by any stretch of the imagination, be recognized as an expert in talking to that market. So what advice could you give to smaller businesses if, for example, they were trying to do business with a company as prestigious as VIVACOM? Because you're going to have an appreciation of the importance of the VIVACOM brand. So VIVACOM presumably have to consider that with whoever they include as a supplier.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, it's hard to get to VIVACOM and to start business with VIVACOM if you are a small company. It might be hard even if you're a big one, because big corporations have specific set of standards for RFP and also procedures, and they're different for each company. So what you need to know someone who can give you information how it works and who can tell you if there is a chance to even try or not, because some of these companies, they have specific contracts and they are in long-term contracts with different suppliers. But you can always ask, you can find someone, tell them directly what you are interested in doing. So, for example, if you want to work with VIVACOM and to sell something to VIVACOM, you don't need to be too pushy, but you just need to go and say, I want to do, I'm selling, for example, let's talk about Umni here. So Ellie, she's got amazing chat box, as I've heard in Leeds, that it's very different than what's on the market. So if Ellie wants to sell to VIVACOM, she can come and ask me, tell me what to do. And then I'm going to think about, okay, what role can this serve? Which department is involved with this? Maybe I can give a call to the person who is responsible for that. And then I will try to connect her to these people. Or maybe I can tell her, listen, Ellie, we already have a chat box and these people are not interested. So maybe not now, but in the future, you can try again if you have something new, a new product. So knowing someone can help you a lot. If you don't know anyone, then you can at least try. Because in VIVACOM, everything is very open. You can find people on LinkedIn. You can find people on the website. So it's not that difficult to find someone to enter the company in a way.
Well, that's a great starter for 10, because before you go into a negotiation, you need to understand the rules. If you start the negotiation without fully understanding what might be possible, you're negotiating in the wrong space. If it's all right, Ellie, I'd just like to briefly show a slide. So if I make myself the presenter.
Sure, go ahead, share your slide, Bob.
Yeah, and it plays into what Chrissy has just shared And I couldn't agree with you any more, because you need to understand what does an agreement look like within VIVACOM. That doesn't mean the budget or the decision-making protocol, but there could be certain service level agreements that are non-negotiable. There could be certain financial imperatives that VIVACOM require. I couldn't tell you what they are, but I do know it's just about impossible, Ellie, to negotiate if you don't understand the other side. And this is typically known as the area of possible agreement. Now, in this one, Ellie, all we're talking about is money. So the buyer's target might be to buy something at a certain price, and the seller's target might be to sell it at a certain price. So what you have is two kind of areas. So it could be, when you're looking at a situation, Chrissy, you have a minimum price point that's non-negotiable. But it could be that the buyer has a maximum price point, which is also non-negotiable. So what you have are two areas of possible agreement. And to make a negotiation viable or worth your while, you need to understand, is there an area of possible agreement? Is there an area? Now, in this instance, and we're talking only about money, yeah, there is an area. Yes, there's an area. It doesn't mean there will be an agreement, but there is an area. It needn't be money. I'll use an anecdote, Ellie. I presume no one will be offended by this as an anecdote, but I'm going back in time. I'm going back to 1968. So I'm guessing I'm the only person on the call that could do that. And there was an opportunity to end the Vietnam War. There was an opportunity. You can look that up if you wish. And what happened, Lyndon B. Johnson was able to commission a peace mission that could meet in Geneva. And a team, it wasn't led by Ho Chi Minh, it was his right-hand man. They were going to send a team to Geneva to work out something. So, you may see these movies and it suggests that everyone was going to just fight it out. But behind the scenes, both parties realized, well, is there an area where we can agree? Because this is, it's beyond all belief what's happening. And to give the point, Chrissy, the American peace delegation, they booked a hotel, a suite of rooms in a hotel in Geneva for 2 weeks. They booked a suite of rooms for 2 weeks and sent 30 people. Ho Chi Minh, his team leased a property for 12 months and sent over a team of 220 people. Now, with those dynamics, Chrissy, do you think there's an area of possible agreement within those two scenarios? Well, there wasn't. So the area of possible agreement, it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be that. It could be, in this instance, the United States were trying to sort it out in 2 weeks because there was going to be a presidential election, whereas the Vietnamese were negotiating for a country. And if I was negotiating for a country, I don't think I'd be looking at 2 weeks and 30 people. So that's not to say that there is not a deal to be done, but you have to think about, before you approach negotiation with a bigger company, the inside story, which is what Christina's talking about. And a lot of this information, Chrissy, is in the public domain. I mean, the bigger the company, you can start to understand what is the area of possible agreement. But it needn't be money. That's the point I'm making. If it was money, well, we can see here, Ellie, it's quite clear that's the only place we can agree financially. And in this instance, that's where the agreement ends up. And you can see that the seller had a surplus because it wasn't their minimum, and the buyer had a surplus, it wasn't their maximum. So when it comes to negotiating, you can only negotiate within the area of possible agreement. There isn't another space. So what we're going to talk about assumes that there is an area of agreement. I'll give you another example if it's all right, Christina. This is about 12 months ago. God, doesn't time fly? I am involved in a software company as a co-founder, and my partner is a Polish guy. He's the co-founder. He's the CEO. Very talented guy, Alexander Gora. And there was an opportunity to meet a VC in Gdansk. Gdansk, it's in the Baltic. And actually, it's really easy to get there from the UK. It's a lot easier than that flight you made, Christina. You fly out from Liverpool at 9 o'clock in the morning, so that's civil. You get to Gdansk about 10:30 Polish time. You can do what you're going to do and leave Gdansk at about 1800. And you're back in Liverpool at 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's a lot more pleasant than what you did.
Yeah, and I remember you said that it's cheaper than going to London, and it's faster.
Yeah, it was, man.
Than the place you are. Yeah?
Yeah, it was about 40 euros each way. I mean, so myself and Alex were there, and I won't go through which country the guys were from. It's no one on this call, but I wouldn't want anyone to get upset about that. But these two guys met us in Gdansk, and they had traveled a lot further than we had. And we come to sit down, and the lead guy said, "We love everything about what you're offering, but I've got to tell you right from the get-go, right from the word go, we don't like your price." Now, my response to that, we haven't even had any conversation. So they've got about 20% of the information. Is if that's someone's opening gambit, I don't think there's a lot of area of potential agreement. Because in my experience, that's not the way to construct a deal if you're serious about it. And what happened, which was quite ridiculous, Ellie, was that I said, okay, I appreciate your feedback. I wasn't expecting it, but I appreciate it. Why don't I pay for the coffees and we wrap this up? You must have better things to do than tell me our price is wrong. You've had a 6-hour flight to tell us our price is wrong, and I appreciate that, but let's wrap it up. Now, the reason I did that, Ellie, is this. It's ridiculous. No one's going to do a 12-hour flight to tell you that they can't do business with you. No one's going to do that. You might as well say, hey, Bob, before we meet face to face, can we just grab some FaceTime on Teams and just have a quick chat? I can't think there's anyone on this call that would fly 6 hours to tell somebody in a meeting in the opening 5 minutes, your price is all wrong, because generally that's a deal breaker. So what it could be, Ellie, it's not money and it's not time. It just could be, if you like, attitude towards doing a deal. What happened, Chrissy, which was pretty darn ridiculous, it went, oh, no, well, look, we can talk about this. And you're kind of left with, well, what was the point of saying that? And it's kind of, we'll have a little look, Chrissy, at a negotiation model. It's this idea of making ridiculous opening offers, it's not the right way to go. If you offer something that's ridiculous, it makes both parties very adversarial. And I would think that if you are a smaller company and a bigger company, in the first 10 minutes are starting to say ridiculous things, you need to think about, are you in the right room? I don't know if that helps a little bit, Chrissy, but that understanding how VIVACOM work and is there an area of potential agreement, that's the starting point. Now, I know that VIVACOM's a fabulous company, very innovative. They've got multiple procurement paths, so that's definitely not the case there. But in general, that's the opening thing, Chrissy. Is there an area of potential agreement? I'll give you another example before we switch sides. I get introduced to some very interesting German companies through Yvonne Kaschalko, who you heard, Christina, in Leeds.
And met.
Yeah, you met him. Well, he's a fabulous guy. He's a co-founder of the Slovak Institute of Directors, and he's a Rotarian. How about that? I think.
Great guy. Amazing on the HR even.
Well, he introduced me to a German bank, and they wanted an 18-month program around negotiation. And in Germany, I partner with a very, very fabulous person, a lady called Kasia Lanucher, and Mrs. Lanucher is from Cambridge University. She speaks German to native standard. She lived in Dortmund for 8 years, I think. So they got this program, and quite rightly, the question was asked, okay, we get this, but what happens if Mrs. Lanucher is unavailable via Cambridge University because of whatever? And what happens if you are not available because you're an independent? It's not like negotiating with a training company. And that actually, Ellie, meant that the area of potential agreement didn't exist because they wanted a program that had more than 2 people in the delivery. There was the problem, Ellie, that the only person that could talk about the negotiation was me, and the only person that could put it into a German context was Kasia, and that's just what the offer was. There wasn't an alternative offer that we could bring other people in. So that again, Chrissy, the area of potential agreement. The bank didn't want a 2-person delivery team, so there was nothing to negotiate. But once we understood that, we actually did something else for them. If that makes sense, Christina.
Yes, it definitely does. And the question that rises now is how to know where your negotiation area is, and how do you prepare to have a specific negotiation behavior to show you what to do and what to talk about. Because honestly, when you were speaking about the first example where you were met with these people who traveled for 12 hours and they said, the price is very high, this is not the right way to start negotiation. Anyone knows that. But they decided to open it like that. So it's a good example to start from.
Yeah, I think what happened, but I'm not in their shoes. And if I can say they were good guys, I think they'd been told to do this because the software was designed to work for banks. That's the first thing. And we had yet to win a bank client outside the pilot. So I think what happened, because of that status, and I knew Alex, they thought, well, it's a young Polish guy. He was 28. He hasn't won his first banking client. And we can push him around. If they'd done any research, which they hadn't, they would have found out very easily, Chris, that that's true. But I did a banking degree at the London School of Economics. I worked for Coutts Bank for 7 years, Barclays International for 2. I'm part of FinTech North. I'm part of the Barclays FinTech Incubator in Shoreditch. Alex clearly wasn't the business development lead, clearly. And the idea that we couldn't find a bank to work with was unlikely. And if we were looking for a bank to work with, it wouldn't be one at the end of a 6-hour flight. So you could have said that we kind of, I understood what they did, but all they had to do was, or whoever told them, look, rough them up a little bit at the start, was just think, well, okay, he's the developer. He's not the guy finding the clients anyway. That's my view of it, because they were good guys. What they also didn't realize is that although we were a small company, we had a pipeline of 5 banks, and they were one of 5 we were talking to. So it works both ways, Christina. If you're a big company, check out who you're talking to, because it's the same thing. I don't know why they didn't check it out, not for a 6-hour flight.
Oh, well, I'm thinking that maybe it's also a cultural thing, because in our area, and also East Europe or Central East Europe, sometimes it happens to us that when we start negotiating, the first thing that people start talking to is about the price.
Yes.
And try to suppress you in a way so that they can see how low you can get, just to wait for a reaction or something. What do you think about that?
I think it's possible, but the same thing happens in England as well. In general, it's not a good strategy whether you're a big company or a small company. If you're a small company, it's not good to start talking about how low your price can be. It's not great to suggest that there's more than one price. If you're a big company, until you are sure that the small company has the credibility to work with you or for you, what does it matter what the price is? It's like it's irrelevant.
And also, if the product will deliver what you need.
Yeah, it's
the timing, the product, and is it going to cover your needs? So strange situation, in my opinion. But anyway,
it happens all the time though. But it probably happens less if someone knows how to negotiate. The price is the last thing. So
they agree with you,
yeah, because I probably trying to think of how many people I've coached this year. It might be 23 on 1-to-1, but mostly it's legal firms in England, and it's always just don't explore the price until you know there is an area of agreement, because the price is irrelevant, whether you're big or small or medium. Yeah, I would think of it like that, Christina. That would be my view.
I agree with you.
I've actually got another presentation, if it's all right, just to show that. I'm not going to dig into loads of PowerPoint, but I think if we had this showing, Ellie, it might make the conversation between Christina and I make more sense if there's a visual.
Yeah, sure.
All right then. Well,
sure.
This one's for all you kids out there. Let's see if you like this one. Okay, wow, look at that, Christina. You don't see many like that. I'm sorry for all the text. I am sorry. Now, Chrissy, you're supposed to ask me where does this come from?
I think I've seen it once in the beginning of our conversations a year ago. So it comes from your area of expertise when you are negotiating for the army. So maybe here it's the right time to tell the audience what you did in your early 20s, because it's a fascinating story.
The model comes from being in the army. It's not an obvious thing. So this model's it's not mine, Ellie. It's absolutely not mine. I was in the South African army, and what had happened, the South African army were involved in a conflict called the Angolan Civil War. The Angolan Civil War, which was essentially the south of Angola was not communist, and the South African army, backed by the United States, were involved in that. And the north of Angola was communist. The combat was delivered by the Cuba, and Cuba was backed by the Soviet Union. So it's that conflict over and over again, just with some different actors. And what had happened, there was a ceasefire, thank goodness, and the United Nations managed the ceasefire and did a great job. And they had to get both sides together because the South Africans wanted a peace because we just didn't have the number of people to carry on with this. That was a reality. And I think the Cubans needed it to end because the Soviet Union just couldn't afford to supply them for this adventure. I mean, you got to imagine moving Cuban soldiers to Angola and then moving Soviet military equipment to Southern Africa. I can't imagine how expensive it was. Our supply line was much less, but we just never had enough people. So we were keen to wrap it up. We definitely were. So what happened? A group of 25 people were recruited to form the negotiation team. I was one of the most junior people, Ellie. The reason I was selected was because I'd been educated in London for 3 years, and it was viewed that I probably had a more international view than someone that had lived in South Africa all their life. And my English was to a better standard than the most people there. So that's why I was chosen. And as the negotiation went on, I was involved more and more, mostly because of my English. So I was a young guy. I was 25, 26 when this was going on. But the cool thing about it, Ellie, was who trained us. That's the really cool thing. We were trained by 2 guys from Harvard, and we didn't have LinkedIn then. So we didn't really know who was who. And rather stupidly, the young guys, of which there was a group of 7 of us, we actually thought that they were Harvard professors. Now I realize that Harvard professors don't normally go into the middle of a civil war to train people. Obviously, they were from Langley. They weren't from Harvard. And they were training us this method of negotiation. And this is how we were negotiating, Chrissy. This was the model. And although you're thinking, okay, well, how does this help me with a big business? It does. It's designed to how you negotiate with a government, and it doesn't get bigger than a government. And perhaps, Ellie, we can go through what some of these actually mean. But that's where it comes from. Any of you that have done a Harvard negotiation program online, you'd probably recognize bits of this if you've done it. And you can see at the bottom, there's all these things that are called currencies. and this is the key thing, Chrissy, when you're talking to a large company. What I mean by that is when I come to Bulgaria, Christina, I land in Sofia. I don't try and spend US dollars in Sofia because that's not the currency of Bulgaria. I guess you're pretty resourceful. You could probably persuade them to take the dollars. But generally, wherever we are, we have to use the right currency, don't we? So if you took over to the right gold currency in Vietnam, the United States, their goal was to do a deal as quickly as possible. But is that the right currency when you're negotiating with the Vietnamese Communist Party? Of course it's not. You've turned up with the wrong currency. You're trying to spend dollars when they only accept rubles. If that makes sense, Christina. That was a question.
Yes, maybe we can put this into perspective of a business negotiation, because sometimes it can look tricky when you put the right gold currency into an example. So let's imagine that Omni and VIVACOM are negotiating. So what is the right gold currency for Omni to consider, in your opinion?
Well, the first thing is that Ellie would need to be speaking to someone so the right personnel, someone that understood the strategic importance of chatbots. I mean, they are strategically important. Chatbots are the future. It all depends on how big a future they may be for your organization, but it's there. So that would be the first thing, Chrissy. Am I speaking to the right person who understands this?
Yes, that makes sense. If she finds the right person who understands this in the organization, then she's got a chance.
That's it. You see, because Omni is a small business, Omni is not the only chatbot deal on the market. I happen to think it's a superior one. So Ellie hasn't got the power to say, look, I am the only person you can talk to about this. So she actually couldn't use power, if that makes sense as well. She couldn't talk about how much money the chatbot is worth because there's not enough case study for a company as big as VIVACOM to make a decision. Because normally you need case studies that go back 3, 4, 5 years with a big company. But the first thing is, is that a question? Am I hearing a question there, Ellie, or is it just someone and their wife or something?
No, I just mute the people. We have newcomers and they didn't mute themselves. I apologize.
Okay, no worries. No, it's cool. Yeah, I think that the key currency, Ellie, is the right personnel. You need someone who understands the potential of chatbot and would know it well enough to understand the differentiation that Omni would present rather than choose an off-the-shelf something from Google or whatever. So I think, Christina, that would be the first. That's the right currency. The other 4, it's just that one. We need to be spending that with. If that makes sense, Christina.
Yes, I'm just looking into the whole pyramid and everything to put into perspective of it.
Yeah. The next thing, it's these bases. So a constraint, which could be a limitation, would be that VIVACOM might say, we want to do a small pilot because we're just trying to understand this technology ourselves. So that's a constraint. So if I was negotiating, I wouldn't present to the procurement director of VIVACOM some huge deal. It would be something small, something niche, and that's a constraint. I would also be looking who would be involved, the personnel, who would be involved, because it would need to be people that understood what good looked like, So I would be looking at those two blocks there in my negotiation. If those two blocks plus the currency weren't there, it's not possible to create an area of potential agreement. Because if they don't have anybody there that understands it, if they don't understand what the constraints could be, and they don't have someone that could measure what good looks like, how can we negotiate? So those two bottom things, Christina, very important. The next one up, the big one on this would be the risk. And it's the risk on both parts. The risk to Ellie would be that presumably VIVACOM would want an exclusive arrangement, because I don't see a company as big as VIVACOM saying, sure, we'll run a pilot and you can run the same pilot anywhere else. I'm pretty certain, Ellie, the constraint would be, yeah, we'll do this, but all the information from the pilot remains with VIVACOM. We don't want you to use our test and use it somewhere else in Bulgaria. But that might be a risk. For you may think, Ellie, well, I don't want that. The risk the other way around is that VIVACOM might be considering, although Ellie's company is innovative, is it robust enough? Is it strong enough to do a pilot for VIVACOM? So you'd have to negotiate around there. I'm hoping that makes sense, Christina.
To me, it does make sense. It also, there is this factor of maturity about the product, because if it's very innovative, it's going to be very difficult for her to explain.
Yeah. If we go to the next level, it's called positioning. And what that means, Ellie, is because it's relatively new technology, although it's not brand new, you have to think about, well, in the negotiation, I need to position not only the credibility of Umni, the credibility of you as the CEO, the credibility of the team, the credibility of the solution, the credibility of the problem that it's solving, and the credibility of the statement. You are going to have to engage with this technology at some point, and can you afford not to have first mover advantage? So when you're negotiating, you need to put that on the table. I'm hoping that makes sense, Christina.
Yes, it makes sense to put things on the table without the other person asking, because it directs the negotiation in a way that helps you move to the upper parts of the pyramid. That's how I imagine this, right?
You are correct. The next one up, the tactics to use, and I think everyone on the call can see this is very complex, so I'm just using a case study. I would be looking at what's called direct fact-finding tactics. And direct fact-finding tactics is, you could ask the question, why hasn't VIVACOM engaged with this technology yet? Just so I understand. Does VIVACOM have the internal capacity to develop this? If VIVACOM was going to engage with this, what kind of vendor would VIVACOM be looking to engage with if we were able to do a deal? What kind of contract would VIVACOM be looking for? These are all direct questions that both parties can understand. Is there an area of potential agreement? That's all that we're doing, Christina. When it's a big company, we go through this process. Is there a deal to be done? That's the point of the pyramid. Can we agree on the basics of have you got people that understand this? Have you got constraints? Have you got people that would know what good looks like? Can you define what risk looks like? What does credibility look like? Can you answer these questions? If you don't go through that process, jumping straight into your price, I'd say, well, how can you even talk about that? And then you've got here concessions. So I would think with a big deal, I'm speculating, I'm guessing, you need to work out in advance, Elliewood, what concessions could I offer VIVACOM? Because people will ask. You can offer a couple of things. One, you could offer exclusivity. One, you could offer your expertise, and you are an expert in this area, Ellie, to take responsibility for the onboarding of this initial program. There are things that you can offer that are concessions. So you could probably work out in advance, if there is a deal, there's 5 or 6 things I can put on the table. There's 5 or 6 things. And then when you get to the closure process, that's the only time that you can talk about terms and condition and price. That's the only time. You can't do the pyramid the other way around. It doesn't make sense for either party. So in terms of negotiating with bigger companies, the first thing, Chrissy, is are both sides talking the same language? Do we have the right currency? Because if you don't, there's not an area of potential agreement. Is there a base position that we can work from? You know, what's the key thing? I currently sell software to banks. So that one actually, Chrissy, is relationship. Banks are so conservative and risk adverse that you cannot negotiate without a relationship. You can't do it. You need someone that understands how a bank works. It's just impossible to negotiate. It's the other thing you would need with a bank is what's called the time assessment. To negotiate with a bank, it could take 12 months. They're not Vietnamese, by the way. It just takes a long time. There's not a quick deal to be done. And if that's outside your area of potential agreement, just shake hands and say, I am the wrong supplier to your bank. I wish you every success. The bank would be different on positioning. It would be association, Ellie. Banks never want to be first, ever, never. So you say, well, let me share with you under a non-disclosure agreement. Who else is using the technology? That's called the power of association. And with a bank, every question has to be asked indirectly. You couldn't speak directly to a bank because they don't respond directly. So there are differences, Christina. I know we haven't got much time, Ellie. I'm just trying to give a flavor of what can be done. Chrissy, yeah? Any questions on that? I mean, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, and it depends on what you want to do and what deal you are negotiating. I would probably go with having this in front of me and think a lot about it, and probably use your help if possible, so that I can negotiate better, especially if I need to negotiate with a foreign company, because it's going to be very difficult for me to understand the culture. So there's a lot involved with the culture of negotiating with a foreign company, a corporation that is even not your native. So I guess it makes sense to think a lot and build your strategy around this. And I want to ask you something, Bob. What tips would you give to someone that wants to win a big deal with a corporation that is, let's say, UK bank, for example? Let's say if Omni is negotiating with Barclays, for example?
Well,
what tips would you give Ellie?
Okay, Ellie, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is you have to be aware of what this zone of potential agreement looks like, this area of potential agreement. You need, if you take this as a roadmap, Ellie, these blocks, and you went through each block, you'd end up with, where can we negotiate? But that's where it always starts. And the thing is, Ellie, people just don't do it. It's a strange one. It's a bit like at the bottom of that one, you've got the right power currency, okay? So you'd think that this bank speaking to me and Alex, they've got all the power. Well, they hadn't reviewed it. They haven't. The amount of power they've got is about 10 minutes. This bank wasn't even in my top 25, my top 50 targets. It's not a bank that would help me in Europe. It's in fact, it might even hinder me, but they hadn't considered actually who's got the power. And it certainly wasn't them. So you need to think about, what is this zone? What could it look like? And you end up with something called a BATNA. Now that is a common term, Ellie. It's called the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, a BATNA. So what this looks like, if you know what your minimum framework looks like, what does it look like if you think, well, I can't do a deal with these today? What does that look like? And few people consider, well, what do we do? Now, what I mean is, Ellie, let's say that you presented what you were doing and they said, well, it's a poor fit. What do you do? You know, I would say, well, on this occasion, it is a poor fit, but can we reconvene in 9 months' time? Because there'll be more information, more considerations. That's probably what's available in this instance. Because the area that we're in, Ellie, it's changing by the day, let alone the month. So I would be looking for that, Christina. That's my first tip. Make sure you know exactly what you can negotiate and where. And within that, if you can't negotiate, what does your exit strategy look like from the negotiation? You know, I don't suggest you say to someone, glad you could make it, let me pay for the coffee, I hope you have a good flight back. But that was the best alternative to wasting, 2 hours of my time trying to convince these two lads that we can't even talk about price. So that's the first tip, Christine. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, it does. Because maybe you are not prepared to start working with the bank now, but if you see that you are not, maybe you won't burn the bridge, let's say, for future negotiation.
You might uncover that they're not prepared. They're not prepared to make a decision because they don't know what they don't know.
This is very possible, especially with technologies like this.
I think the second thing is try and understand as much as you can about the other side's point of view. The thing is, for big companies to stay competitive, they have to innovate. They have to innovate. They've got no choice. And it becomes harder the longer you are in a big company in procurement to make innovative decisions, because it becomes harder, and it gets harder for bigger companies to be innovative because you have this culture, well, this is the way we do things. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But I always think that when you do your research, try and look for what areas of innovation is this big company interested in. What kind of events do they sponsor? What kind of news have they got? What kind of direction they're going in? What's their vision statement? What new markets are they trying to penetrate? This gives you a picture on what's important to them, and that gives you the idea for the right proposition currency. Like I know in the UK, banks are closing offices, Christina.
Yeah.
It's a big program in the UK, and that limits their business development. So I always talk about my own software within the context of branch closures.
Yeah, because you know it's important for them, and that's what they do.
Yeah,
This is an excellent tip, especially if you see a company is very oriented into sustainability, then you can build your proposition around meeting the goals of sustainability of the company.
well, I can negotiate in that space all day long. I can't negotiate when the only conversation is the price point, because we don't even know if we're a good fit. And people only pay for a good fit.
I think this is an excellent tip that you should always remember when negotiating with a company, even if it's not a big one. But the big ones are easy to research in terms of this, because they have specific marketing agenda about what to do and PR activities around this. Smaller ones are difficult to track because they don't pay to promote events.
Definitely.
Sometimes you cannot find information.
I'll give you, thanks to your input there, I'll give you an example of what's called offset assessment. Offset. It's about what you're prepared to offset. So, for example, sometimes people are prepared to offset quality for quantity. And sometimes people are prepared to offset a price reduction for speed. There's different things where people will offset. So, for example, in our software, this is another tip. Be prepared to share information. Don't think it's like a game of poker, okay? So the thing I share, Chrissy, is our development pathway. Because when people buy software, what's available right now is interesting. But I say, look, that's interesting, but the real reason to deal with this is our development pathway. Let me show you what the new releases look like in Q1 and Q2 of next year. And let me share with you who heads up the development team. That's the main reason banks are dealing with us, because we've got a robust development pathway. We know exactly where we're going, and it's aimed at banks that are shutting branches. We compensate for your business development. Now, that's an offset, because they can say, well, these guys haven't been in business that long, but look, they've got a hell of a program in front of them, and it's funded. They've already got the funding for it. When you're negotiating, you can offset. You can say, sure, you can go with this brand, and it might be 10% cheaper, and it's been on the market 5 years. I get that. I get it. But you come with us, we're roughly where they are, technology-wise, but look where we're going. And it's much easier for a smaller company to go quickly than a bigger one. So can we negotiate around this before we come to the price point? Can we? If you don't tell people, they can't hear it, Chrissy. So that's what offset means.
Be prepared. You need to be prepared to say it without them asking.
Yeah. Right? I would think in a negotiation, the last tip, because there's so many here.
Yeah.
It's when you come to the closure process, try and put 2 or 3, let's call them deals on the table. So here's the advantage of VIVACOM dealing with me. In fact, I'll give a couple of examples of this. I'm able there and then in front of you and your team, I can put 2 or 3 deals on the table there and then, because we're small. If you're dealing with I'm not going to name a big name company because it's not appropriate, but they can't do that, because the business development lead has to go back to her boss, who has to go back to the development team. but I can put that on the table immediately. That is called a reliever. People want to do business with people that can make decisions, and smaller companies can. I'll give you an example of this, Ellie. Back in the UK, I had the opportunity to present something to Manchester Metropolitan University. So it's Manchester Met. And I was one of, 17 they could choose from. And I know that because they told me. But I was the smallest one. And I only went forward because someone said, you want to pitch for this and negotiate? They came back to me in the meeting and said to me what they didn't like. Ellie, I got back to them that evening via email with an alternative proposal. That's called a reliever. I'm not going to name the training companies, and there were 5 universities that were pitching for the money, but they couldn't do that. That's how I ended up with the work. Ellie, I don't believe that I was the best solution or the most competitively priced solution, but I was the solution that could quickly make decisions and quickly respond, which gave them relief. That doesn't work, Christina, in every environment, but when you're negotiating, that was the thing I could put on the table. Thank you for your feedback. I'll give you a new proposal this evening. You can respond to it tomorrow.
Yeah, and maybe you can ask directly what is it that they didn't like about the previous proposal so that you can fix it. And maybe you can ask, what if I fix it for you by tomorrow?
Yeah.
How things will look like then?
Yeah, it's a direct fact-finding tactic. What don't you like? If I can fix it, I will. And that gives the other side relief.
This is very useful and it works. Because I know because I've seen it, I've tried it, and it really does.
Well, that's the quickest hour and 10 minutes of my life, I think, Ellie. I don't know how it...
I don't know how time flies so fast, really, this evening.
I think we shall give opportunity for a couple of questions if people that are in the webinar would like to ask.
Yeah, quite happy to respond as best as possible. So, yeah.
So anyone would like to ask a question, you can unmute yourself and just freely ask. You don't need to write it down and stuff like that.
So what you say, Bob, is it's best to be responsive if you're a small company and respond on the spot with an offer based on what you hear during the negotiation. Is this what you said?
Yeah, I think what you need to prepare is your own area of potential agreement. So have it in mind immediately, the space that you have where you could agree there and then, if that's what you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah. If it's a price reduction, I would always suggest do that very slowly.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, because
it's a good laugh, not a bad laugh.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Because if you give your price position away really easily, it suggests that the original price position wasn't that robust.
Yeah.
And also, sorry to get into this, but I would also say if you're going to give a new price position, don't give a round figure, Deso. Don't do that. Do it like 6.2%. Don't do 5. 11.3%, not 10. Because if it's rounded, it's too clean. It's like your original price point wasn't accurate.
Okay.
If that, it's a bit like this, man. If me and you were on a car forecourt, right, in England, and you saw a car priced for 24,999 euros, We both know that's not a proper price, man. That's nobody makes a car for 24,999 euros.
Okay.
It can't be that, can it? It's under 25,000. So you know that, okay, that can't be the price point. So let's find what the price point is, if that helps you at all.
Okay. Would you recommend that when they fight you for price, that you ask for something else? You lower your price, but then you negotiate on something else?
Yeah, I would. I'd use
I do that all this is why I'm asking, because I say, okay, but let's do whatever you want to do, which is non-price.
Yeah, let's see what's possible. So we sometimes get that with our software offer, and we say we can do a trade if you can fund the license annually, not monthly.
Sure. Okay. So that's money up front. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if it's a 5-year deal and not a 3-year deal.
Sure.
It's to try and put other things on the table within that box, rather than just say, yeah, okay, whatever the figure is.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure, man.
Is it the same negotiation if you look into the big corporation, not like a customer, but a partner? So you can get access to their customers.
Yeah, it's kind of, there's a language around it, and yeah, you can trade as well. Can I give you a story? Do you mind another story, Christina? You know what I'm like with stories. Yeah, she's agreed. All right. Well, I was asked. No, I normally, Deso, do I have a contract with a major insurance company in England. I'll tell you who it is. It doesn't matter. It's not a secret. It's a company called Aviva. And I know the sales director there, a guy called Mike Farrell. And for the last 2 years running, he's asked me to speak at the conference about how to resist discounts. Okay. And that's been my little story, Christina. So they say, oh, we've got this conference. And at the end of it, we've got this guy, and he's going to explain to you how to resist discounts. And it's a big company, Aviva. So last year, Mike rang me up. He goes, oh, man, he said, we've got a new lady running procurement. So I said, okay, that's cool. And he said, she's not happy with how much we're paying you. I said, okay. I said, well, what does she want to do? He said, well, next time you're in London, can you drop in for a coffee? I said, of course I can. It's near Pall Mall. And he goes to me, I need to warn you. I said, okay. What are you warning me about? Is it safe? And he goes, no. He said, she's a qualified negotiator. I said, okay. And he said, she's got an award from the Institute of Procurement in the UK. So I said, that's okay. That's cool. It means she knows what she's doing. I said, that's okay. The problem is when you're negotiating with people that just don't know what they're doing. I said, I'm happy to sit down with her. So I met up with her, and she said to me, I'm reviewing all the suppliers, and you're a supplier. I said, okay. And she said, this is too much. I said, okay. And I said, well, can we talk about it, or you've just come in to tell me off? She said, we can talk about it. So we got talking, and this is exactly what happened. I won't go through the whole thing because it's not that interesting, but we got talking about, I explained where my invoice came from. And if you explain where the cost of something comes from, it makes it easier for the other side to understand. They needn't agree with it, but at least they understand it. So I said, well, the first thing is I have to travel to London and back by train. So she said, well, we could pay for that and we could probably get it at a better price. And I said, of course, I'm happy with that. So let's take that out. Because you're Aviva, you'll get better train fares than I can. And I have to stay the night in a hotel because I never, ever travel on the day of a big conference because something could happen. She goes, I understand that. So she said, we've got a house in London and you can stay in that. I said, that's better than any hotel I stay in. So we took that out. And then we got talking and she said, how come you're charging us for a day for 1 hour? I said, I'm at the conference. I have to listen to the speakers to know what I'm following, because accidentally I could say something in my slot that might contradict an earlier speaker. I cannot just turn up and speak for an hour at the 7th largest insurance company in Europe. It would be ridiculous. So she started to understand that I had to be in the conference, which is, if anyone on this call was at that conference, you could not risk just turning up and speaking. There might be something in the Q&A that contradicts what you're going to say. There might be a keynote speak from the chairman that could contradict what you would say. You could not afford just to turn up. Now, she didn't understand that till I explained it. So then so she understood the hours, and then we got into the price point. She goes, well, we got talking. I said, look, I understand you're new to the role, and there's no way you can let me out of this room without a discount. I understand it, because you've got to go back to your boss and say, I beat that Bob Spence up. I got something from him. I get it, but can we talk about it? Because, so this is what happened in the end. I got a discount. No, she got a discount, but I got paid within 5 days. And insurance companies don't pay you within 5 days. Let me tell you this. But this is what happened. I said that, look, if the price point is far too much, how about I get you another speaker for free? And she said, what kind of speaker? So I said, okay, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so that's 8 o'clock in America. I can get in the room, because it's in a really posh hotel, the Dorchester. So the sound system's fantastic. The Wi-Fi, the connectivity is like NASA. It's like NATO. It's
like in Bulgaria.
Yes. Yes. So, yes, VIVACOM. There's no doubt about that. So she said, who can you get? Well, I said, I can get a guy on a call called Dennis Wilson, and he's one of the top 10 insurance brokers in the United States. And he'll speak for free for 30 minutes on business development. I can get him for free. And I can get him because my mate, Len, works for his company in Los Angeles. I guarantee it. So I said, I'll speak, and then he can speak. What's there not to like? So then she says, okay, that's interesting. She said to me, I used to work for AXA Insurance, which is massive in Europe. I said, okay. She said, if I could get you an introduction to the sales director of AXA, is that interesting? I says, man, if I give you Dennis Wilson and you give me AXA, I'll give you 10%. We're in business. Now, the truth of it is, Ellie, I would have paid for an introduction to the sales director of AXA, because they're so hard to get in front of, man. But when you're dealing with someone, Chrissy, who knows how to trade, who knows how to negotiate, it's easier, because you can do a deal outside the area of potential agreement. So that's my little story, Ellie, if that helps anybody.
It was an amazing story, I think. You need to think outside of the box all the time.
Yeah, people, you can go in with the lowest price every time, but there's always something else to talk about. But you got, that's why this relationship thing.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I
just want to say that I need to leave now, but it was an amazing evening, and I'm happy that I spent it with you. So
great to see you, Christina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think there, Ellie, we need to wrap up.
Yes,
And,
8:30, the 1.5 hour flew away so fast. Thank you so much. Christina already left, but to her and to you again, Bob, on behalf of the Rotary business community, for sharing your time and wisdom and experience. Pretty interesting, and I would say even exotic. And this recording will be shared with everyone. There was a question if the slides could be shared or some notes next week to the participants. I don't know, like
I tell you what, that's Yvonne. I'll get something to you, Ellie, next week. That as a series of prompts, and I'll happily send the pyramid over as well. And I know it's complicated, but it's something, you know.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Right, well,
thank you, Bob.
good night, and see all the guys.
Thank you.